Welcome. I'm going to give folks just another minute or two to come on in here, and then we'll get started. We have two sessions with the same set of panelists, so if we run out of questions here, we can always sort of use the next section to start some additional conversation. So I just wanted to offer that and let folks know about that. Okay, so I just want to get started. Go ahead and get started. I put a general invitation for folks to introduce themselves in the chat if they just want to say hi. That's great. My name is Carrie, Diaz, Eaton. I am the moderator of this panel. I am pleased to introduce our two panelists, Dr. Erin Bodine, who's a professor at Rhodes University, and Dr. Joanna Wares, who is a professor at University of Richmond. We're sort of all math biologists by grounding, but through various ways, it turns out we have a lot of overlapping interests, and Dr. Bodine and Dr. Wares both have been doing some disease modeling work in the classroom that revolves also with social justice interfaces with social justice issues. And I think in the time of COVID-19, this is sort of a particularly interesting thing, but it's not just about COVID-19. And so we're pretty excited to have both of them. Since neither had a particular order preference, I'm gonna sort of start in terms of like historical order in terms of the type of disease. That's like the best, most objective way I could start. So I'm gonna first pass the baton to Dr. Erin Bodine, and she's gonna talk a little bit about her modeling class. Erin, go for it.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and thank you, Carrie, for inviting me to be on this panel. So there is a class that I teach regularly at Rhodes College, and it's called Continuous Math Modeling and Scientific Writing. And the class was initially designed to be an upper level elective for math majors and also one of the cornerstone courses for the biomath major at Rhodes College, which is an undergraduate only institution. So within the course, as the name indicates, there is a focus on scientific writing. So the students work in groups over the entire semester to work on modeling projects. So they work with the same group over the entire semester, and they are both learning how to construct a model, how to analyze the model, and then also how to write a scientific paper about the model. And the type of modeling that I have found it to be easiest for students to quickly engage in is epidemiological models. And the past few iterations that I've taught the course, I have found two diseases in particular to be really useful to both resonate with the students and also introduce topics of social justice. So one of them is yellow fever, and that has a very specific connection to Memphis, where Rhodes College is situated. So in 1878, there was a very horrific yellow fever outbreak in Memphis that very much changed the trajectory of the city in many ways. And so as a part of talking about modeling and about that particular disease, there is also a lot of data for that particular outbreak, even though it was in 1878. And so we are able to, as a part of our discussions and a part of the modeling, talk about disparities in income and wealth and how that led to differences in who was impacted by the disease. Those who had means were able to leave the city and basically avoid getting infected. There's also data about the racial inequities during that particular outbreak, and we're able to talk about that as well. And then also geographic location, which kind of overlays on top of the racial inequities and the wealth and income inequities. So there's a lot of data for that, and it's an interesting model for introducing a vector-borne disease as well. And so peppered throughout the course, we have discussions as we're talking about the yellow fever models and ways in which the students might want to expand upon a basic yellow fever model. They're encouraged to think about modeling approaches which take into account these different inequities. And we have discussions about the ways in which we can do that. The other disease that I have been using in this class is tuberculosis. So there are several nice, very basic tuberculosis models to get students started. There's some good introductory models for students. And then I have also found it useful to talk about tuberculosis. So in the social justice sense, we bring up a lot of issues about, so there have been outbreaks of tuberculosis in the rural United States. And so we talk about access to healthcare, the other thing that has come up with that is the cost and access to preventative screening, which can prevent worsening of the disease. And so all of this is sort of, it is not a single discussion that happens in one class out of the semester. It is peppered in throughout the class. As we introduce more components to the mathematical model, we talk about these different issues which relate to issues of social justice and sort of bring them into the model and have discussions about them within the class. So I think I'll leave it there for now.
Thanks, Erin. And what I'll do is I'll go to Joanna. She can give a little bit of background and context for her class, and then we'll save the rest for questions for both of you. And again, for those of you who just came in, we have a second session, and that one also will have plenty of time for discussion. So if you would like to join us for the second session, that's great. Okay, Joanna, take it away.
Thanks, Carrie. So I wanted to, before I talked about my course, first give y'all access to, in the chat, this summer, a group of us came together to develop some modules that are all open access around COVID-19, and some of them also have some social justice ideas in them. So these are just freely posted on this Google site. Some of them are also on Cube's Hub. So I wanted to give you access to those. There's some for differential equations courses. So about my class, I created this class idea in the fall of 2019, and it was called Computational Modeling in Public Health and Injury Science, because I do a lot of work in both of those areas. And then, around March, I said, okay, this is going to be a class about COVID modeling. We started seeing this. Everyone was publishing, in all different ways, differential equations models, agent-based models. There was a lot coming out. I'm like, this is a whole class, but there was this concern about, and we've talked about this in other forums, like the trauma that we're all experiencing around this pandemic right now. And, is it appropriate to be teaching this in our classes? And what I found from all of my classes, because it's come up in every single one of my classes, Calc 2, financial math, computational modeling, is the students do want to talk about it and they're interested in learning about the techniques. And to make it a safer space and make everybody feel comfortable, on this website, we have some suggestions about how to let them know we're going to be talking about this, and also to let them tell you what they need to feel comfortable. So I think that's a really important first idea, that since we are all having different types of traumatic experiences from this, and like mental health crises are off the charts right now, that it's important to recognize that before you start talking about it in the classroom. But beyond that, it's been really a very positive experience for me, having a whole class centered on what's going on right now. First of all, we see huge amounts of interest from everybody in society, right? Like we've never seen that before. Erin probably knows that, you know, maybe it was interesting in her class, but I was like doing MRSA work before modeling and whatever, and people were like, interested. You know, I don't know if this happens to you, but you say, oh, I'm a mathematician. And then people are like, oh, I have no idea what you think about, you know? And I'm like, no, you do. It's like diseases and whatever. And it's these other things, concussions. But now everyone's like, tell me how you're doing this. It's a totally different feel. So our students especially, like, what is going on? What does it mean when we see this study that says masks are going to do all these things? You know, there was this computational study that was like all over the Facebook and everything, and it was all modeling about the effectiveness of masks early on. So in my class, we really focused on differential equations modeling and agent-based modeling. And this was a senior, all seniors class. And they built their own models, and they were all really interested in the social justice aspect. So two groups of in the class have gotten internal grants from the university to continue doing the research. And both groups are studying like economic injustice in what's happened and some racial injustice. So I think it's really interesting. And, you know, a lot of the students were from China, so it wasn't even just like an American only interest. It was broad interest across the group. So yeah, so I'll just stop there. And a lot of it is the same thing Erin was saying, like there's a lot of data, right? And we have some socioeconomic and racial data about what's going on. So we're trying to incorporate that.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us the context of both the classes there. I invite folks to either unmute or ask questions in the chat window. Just to get us started, while folks are thinking about questions, just a really quick question for Erin and Joanna, both, if you can just respond. What is the preparation level of the students that enter into your class? Is this something that they take after calculus? Is it before? Can you just give us a quick answer about that?
Yeah, so for my course, I get students from one of two different prereqs. So either they have taken the differential equations class, or they have taken, I teach another math modeling class that is discrete math modeling that has no calculus prereq. So the other requirement is that they have taken that modeling class and Calc 2. So one of those two routes.
Yeah, for my class, I had a prereq of differential equations, which has a prereq of linear algebra at my university. But I did have a few students who didn't have differential equations, and they, you know, if they're that type of student who wants to be overridden into the class, like they were fine understanding what's going on. But I also did assessments in my Calc 2 class that were from my, like they were similar to the ones on our website, where I just added a different, you know, we teach differential equations, the beginning differential equations in Calc 2. And I added a section like where you're solving an exponential growth equation and like finding the rate, right? And then we look at fitting the beginning of the CDC's positivity rate data, which at first is like exponential. Like if you cut off the first 30 days, it's exponential, and then it's linear. And so that shows them like how to fit exponential and linear. And then it also lets them know how terrible that is as a predictive model, because an exponential model is going to blow up so fast, you know. So you can start asking questions about modeling, even in Calc 2, where you don't really need any experience.
Cool. So I'm curious about, since each of these are embedded in a context, and maybe let's go reverse order. Joanna first, and then Erin. How much like biology buildup did you need to do for students to be able to engage, or even local context buildup or economic context buildup?
That's such a great question. And now I'm trying to think about the answer, right? So I think, you know, we would talk about different topics related in my upper level class. We talked about COVID, and I think people were very, you know, I didn't need all the molecular, you know, virus, you know, how viruses work, because it was all population dynamics. So we were studying it at the population dynamics level. So I don't like most of them had no biology background. They weren't even science majors. Most of them are business majors at my school, you know, math, econ, but they wanted to do like stats and modeling, and they were fine. So really, I think just having been aware from what's going on in, you know, from newspaper and TV, it was enough. And then they could read about it and it was fine. And then for the data with like the social justice issues, I was surprised at how they were coming up with, you know, way different ways than I would think to analyze the data and find different data sources. And they were, you know, they're much better at that than I am, just because I'm old and they're young. So they're really doing a much better job at that than I would have done. But I'm like, you know, we could find things so easily because there's so much for COVID, at least right now. Like people, I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's just all over the place. And the students are great at finding it and trying, you know, analyzing it. But they were upper level students who had like statistics, and some of them had a probability. And so they were better at it.
Erin, did you want to?
Yeah, so I'll just say that I think, as Joanna said, I mean, this is one of the things that makes these epidemiological models such a great entry point for students in terms of modeling. The biological background that you need to get started is not extensive. So typically I will spend about half a lecture at the beginning going over some of the basic terms and talking about, you know, just in general, you know, here are different ways in which different diseases are transmitted. And then, you know, in later lectures, we start layering that onto, okay, well, when you have this type of transmission, you know, through droplets, you know, here is how we're going to model it. And, you know, when you have vector-borne transmission, here is how we're going to model it. But I think, as Joanna said, right, because you're dealing with populations and the notion of either number of individuals or density of individuals is a pretty easy concept for most students to understand, even if, you know, the last time they took biology was in high school. It's an easy entry point for them. And though they do get much more into the biology as the semester goes, they start getting really excited about these different diseases. And I have found that the students, they end up leaving the class with like a favorite disease, which is a little bit weird to think about, but you know, they get really attached to a particular disease, you know, whatever disease their group chooses to model in the second half of the semester. And they get really into looking up the biology about it, different forms of treatment, different forms of intervention, and they really dig into it and they get excited about it.
Cool. We have some requests in the chat window to share curriculum materials. I know Joanna already shared her website and the website of her collaborators, but Erin, also that goes for you too, if folks want to know where they can get access to the data, or if you have any curriculum to share as well.
Yeah, I will, between the two sessions, I will get some links and share some of that. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thanks.
And I have some other, I did all of my upper level class in R. So I created a bunch of workshop files for the class. If anyone's interested, you can just email me. I put my email in the chat. But one of them was created off of something that Erin did. So you made this really nice net logo intro. You know, what was it wasn't a disease model. It was something else. What was it? I forget.
Was it the rabbits and grass introduction?
Yeah. It was just like an intro. First, because none of my students had done agent-based modeling at all, right? So this was like, here's what net logo looks like. Here's what these screens look like. Here's how you put everything in. So, and then there were like people who were doing very basic COVID models. So we got a COVID model in net logo that someone had created. And my assignment was basically like plagiarize Erin's document and like write the exact same thing, but for like explaining this COVID program that's already created. So that way they had to learn like what every piece did, but also just like basic COVID modeling for the class. And then like some of the students were very nervous, like, can I just do like, write what she wrote? And I'm like, yeah, it's the same for that button, you know? They like felt so uncomfortable plagiarizing the thing, but the exercise was to learn how net logo worked. And I thought that was really, your document was so beautifully written that.
Oh, well, thank you.
I love the crossload that's going.
It was a first introduction to net logo for students. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
and
love this
from that,
like cross-pollination.
Yeah, and I got it off of cubes, right? And they really learned it because then they were building their own NetLogo model. Like I didn't teach them much more than that, right? So after that, they could do it just from having to think through how each of the parts work and like the basic coding structure for NetLogo.
Nice.
I just want to pause us because like already 20 minutes just flew past, and I think we're supposed to have a quick 5-minute break. And I know, Erin, you wanted to find some links to share. So just in the interest of everyone having whatever bio break they need or to adjust rooms, let's just take a quick pause for 5 minutes, and please, everyone, come back. We'll start again at 11:55.